And so we settle in. You can feel your body beginning to grow heavy, in the most pleasant way, in our time together tonight. Nothing to understand, only the gentle rhythm of a story about a different kind of life, a different kind of morning, a world without a single buzzing notification, but perhaps with a few other, smaller, more active companions. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this quiet place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel moved to do so, you can leave a comment below, letting me know the city you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the quiet world. It's a comfort to know we're all resting under the same wide, dark sky. All right, let the shadows in your room grow long and soft. Maybe you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing, and together, let's allow the story to begin, not with a grand opening, but with the very first, and perhaps most honest, sensation of your day. The light that wakes you isn't light at all. It's an itch, a tiny, persistent prickle on your ankle, just above the bone. You don't need to be fully awake to know what it is. You shift your leg, a slow, sleepy movement, and the rustle of straw beneath you is the second sound of your morning. The first is the soft, rhythmic breathing of your husband and the two small children sleeping on pallets near the hearth. The itch comes again, this time on the back of your knee. You reach down under the rough wool blanket and scratch. This is morning. There is no gentle chime, no soft glow of a phone screen. There is only the gradual shift from the deep black of sleep to the murky grey of a pre-dawn room. You open your eyes. The ceiling is low, darkened with years of soot from the fire that is now just a pile of cold, white ash. The air is thick with the smell of sleep, of unwashed bodies, of damp wool, and the faint, ever-present dusty scent of the straw that is your bed. You are lying on a palliasse, which is really just a large sack, probably made of coarse burlap stuffed with whatever was available. For you, it's straw. It's lumpy. You know every lump, every hollow. Over the months, your body has compressed it into a landscape of familiar hills and valleys. But it's not just straw in there. It's a whole ecosystem. You scratch your side now, a subconscious, automatic gesture. The fleas are always worst in the morning, or so it seems. They are your uninvited bedfellows, your constant low-level hum of discomfort. Historians in their clean, quiet archives still gently debate the awareness of this. Were you so accustomed to this itchy reality that it was simply part of being alive, like breathing? Or did you feel a tiny, weary flicker of resentment every single time you had to scratch? We tend to imagine our ancestors as somehow tougher, more immune to these discomforts. But perhaps they were just more resigned. You know the straw needs changing. It's a huge, back-breaking chore that happens only a few times a year. You have to empty the whole heavy sack, haul the old, broken, and frankly, infested straw out to the midden heap, and then go about the long process of acquiring and stuffing fresh straw back in. Sometimes you'll mix in dried herbs or bracken fern, a folk remedy your mother swore by to keep the worst of the pests away. It's a nice thought. The fleas, however, don't seem to mind. They are a force of nature, as reliable as the sunrise. And they are not alone. You try not to think about the other things that might be sharing your walls. The lice, which are a problem for your hair and clothes, but can certainly find their way into bedding. The tiny mites. The occasional spider seeking refuge from the cold. Your bed is not a sterile sanctuary of rest. It's a shared living space. A miniature, bustling world hidden from the eye. You push yourself up, sitting on the edge of the mattress. The straw crunches and crackles under your weight. The air in the room is cold, raising goosebumps on your arms beneath the thin linen of your shift, the simple long shirt you sleep in, and which you will also wear under your clothes for the day. You can see the faint outline of the wooden shutter over the single, small window. No light comes through its cracks yet. The day has not truly begun, but your day has. It began with an itch, as it so often does, and as you sit there, in the cold and the dark, you take a moment, just a moment, before your feet touch the cold, packed earth floor. You have a long, long way to go before you can return to this lumpy, itchy, rustling rectangle of straw. And weirdly, you know you'll be grateful for it when you do. Your feet touch the floor. It's not wood, not stone, just cold, hard-packed earth. It's been swept so many times it has a slight polish to it in places, but it's still fundamentally dirt. A shiver works its way up your spine, a cold greeting from the ground up. You move slowly, your body still stiff with sleep, towards a small, rough-hewn shelf in the corner. On it sits a clay pitcher of water you filled last night, a shallow wooden bowl, and a small, folded piece of cloth. It is your entire bathroom, condensed into a 2-foot square of space. You pour a little of the frigid water into the bowl. The splash is loud in the morning quiet. Dipping your fingers in, you quickly splash your face. It's less of a wash and more of a brutal, icy shock designed to chase away the last remnants of sleep. You don't use soap. Soap, or at least the harsher version you use for laundry, is far too precious and caustic to be used on your face every day. That's a luxury for special occasions, if ever. Now for your teeth. You pick up the small square of linen. It's rough, woven from flax, and has the texture of a very soft bristled brush, if you're being generous. In reality, it feels a bit like fine grits and paper. This is your toothbrush. You dip a corner of it into the clean water, then lean over the bowl. There is no gleaming white tube of paste. Instead, next to the bowl is a tiny pile of grayish powder. It's a mix of salt and fine salt scraped from the inside of the hearth. This is a common practice, a bit of folk wisdom passed down through generations. The salt is believed to purify, and the soot is a mild abrasive, meant to scrub away the film that builds up overnight. You dip the damp cloth into the powder, getting just a little bit on the end. Then, you bring it to your mouth and begin to rub. You scrub your front teeth, your gums, working your way back along the sides. The feeling is pretty. The taste is predictably salty and dashy. There's no minty foam, no satisfying zing of modern cleanliness. There is just the feeling of wet, abrasive cloth against your enamel. You are acutely aware that you are mostly just pushing the grime around. Still, it's better than nothing. It breaks up the fuzzy, stale film in your mouth, and the salt leaves a cleaner, sharper taste than what you woke up with. Historians and archaeologists, when they examine the teeth from skeletons of your time, often find them surprisingly free of cavities, but worn down significantly. This is partly due to a diet low in sugar, but also because of this very act. You are literally sanding your teeth down over the years. Scholars still discuss the primary motivation for this ritual. Were you genuinely concerned with preventing tooth decay, a concept you likely understood only as a tooth worm causing agonizing pain? Or was it a more social concern, an attempt to manage bad breath in a world where everyone lived in very close quarters? The answer is likely a bit of both. A practical, preventative measure rooted in a deep, human desire not to offend the person you're speaking to just by breathing on them. There were other, more elaborate tooth powders for those who could afford them. Crushed herbs like sage or mint could be added, or even exotic spices. Some recipes call for powdered bone, crushed oyster shells, or chalk. But for you, salt and soot are what's available. They are the tools of your simple, daily maintenance. You finish, and you lean over, spitting the grey, gritty slurry not into your bowl of clean water that would be a waste, but into the cold, dead ashes of the hearth. It will be swept up later with the rest of the debris. You swish the remaining water in the bowl around your mouth and spit, but into the hearth as well. Your mouth feels scoured, not clean in the way we'd understand it, but certainly different. Better, the first chore of the day is done. The stale taste of sleep has been scraped away. You must clothe the body you've just woken up. You turn towards a wooden chest at the foot of your straw bed, the place where your entire wardrobe resides. The lid of the wooden chest groans as you lift it, the familiar complaining sound. A faint, musty smell of wool and old linen rises to meet you, the smell of your entire wardrobe. It is not an expansive collection. There are 2 of everything, maybe 3, 1 to wear, 1 to wash, and 1 for mending, if you are fortunate. You are already wearing the first layer of your daily attire. Your shift, this simple long linen shirt, reaches your knees. It's your underwear, your nightgun, your primary shield against the world. Its main purpose isn't really to keep you warm, but to protect your outer clothes from the sweat and oils of your body. Wool is difficult to clean and expensive to replace. Linen is comparatively easier. Still, easier is a relative term. You might wash this shift once a week if you're diligent, maybe less in the winter. For now, you simply wear the one you slept in. It's already imbued with the warmth of your body, which is a small comfort in the cold room. Next, you pull out your kirtler. This is your main dress, a long-sleeved, ankle-length garment made of heavy, coarse wool. It's a faded, earthy color, somewhere between brown and gray, dyed with something simple like walnut husks. Popular culture loves to paint your world in shades of mud, and while that's not entirely untrue for the poor, historians are always debating just how colorful the medieval world really was. Even simple, locally sourced plants could produce yellows from weld, or blues from woad. A vibrant red, however, made from crushed insects or rare minerals would cost a fortune. Your dress is the color of practicality. It's the color that doesn't show dirt. You pull the heavy garment over your head. The wool is scratchy against your skin, a constant, low-level abrasive presence. It's also oily. Wool naturally contains lanolin, which makes it water-resistant, a very useful quality in a world of damp and drizzle. But it also means the fabric holds onto dirt and smells with incredible stubbornness. Washing this heavy wool garment is an ordeal, a once or twice a year event involving large tubs, harsh soap, and days of drying time. So you don't. You spot clean it, you brush it, and you air it out. But mostly you just wear it. Before you fully adjust the kirtler, you perform a small, almost unconscious ritual. You run your gaze along the thick, interior seams of the dress. The seams are a haven, a little city of refuge for the other constant companions of your life. Body lice. They lay their eggs, the nits, in the warm, dark crevices of the cloth. With a quick, practiced flick of your thumbnail, you scrape along a seam near the armpit. And there it is, a tiny, pale comma, no bigger than a sesame seed. You expertly pinch it between your two thumbnails and press. There is no sound, just a faint, unsatisfying give. One down. A million to go. This isn't a moment of horror for you. It's not an infestation to be eradicated with chemical shampoos and frantic cleaning. It is a simple fact of life as mundane as breathing. Your clothes aren't just a covering. They are a habitat, a walking, wearable ecosystem. You don't think of it as disgusting. You think of it as normal. You finish dressing. You cinch a simple leather belt around your waist, from which you might later hang a small knife or a pouch. You pour on thick woolen stockings, holding them up with garters tied just below your knee. Finally, you slip your feet into simple leather shoes, little more than soft-soled slippers that have been stitched and then turned inside out, a common style known as a turned shoe. They offer little protection from the ground, but they are better than nothing. You must also cover your hair. You twist your uncombed hair into a rough bun and cover it with a simple linen coif, a close-fitting cap that ties under your chin. Now you are dressed. Encased in layers of linen and wool, itchy, a little bit damp from the air. Home to a thriving population of tiny creatures. The familiar weight of the wool on your shoulders and the leather belt cinched at your waist means you are now ready to face the day, and the first task is to get rid of last night's output. Now dressed, or at least encased, you turn to the day's first true chore. It's waiting for you patiently. Under the low-framed bed, you crouch, the wall of your kirtler scratching the back of your knees, and reach into the darkness. Your fingers find the cold, curved side of a ceramic pot. It's made of cheap earthenware, unglazed and porous. You grip its single handle and slide it out across the packed earth floor, the chamber pot. It is heavy, and it is nearly full. The contents from the night from your husband, yourself, and the sleepy, stumbling s of the children have all collected here. As you stand lifting it with both hands for balance, a sharp, acrid smell of ammonia cuts through the other stale scents of the room. It's a familiar smell, as much a part of the morning air as the cold itself. You don't trinkle your nose or gag. This is not a moment of revulsion. Physical fact must now be dealt with. Spilling this inside your one-room home would be a catastrophe, creating a mess that would linger for days. So you are careful. Very, very careful. You move with a slow, practiced shuffle towards the front of the house, not to a door but to the single wooden shutter that serves as your window. It's held shut by a simple wooden bar. You place the pot down for a moment, your muscles grateful for the release, and lift the bar. With a low groan, you push the heavy shutter open. A wave of cool, damp air washes over you. It carries with it a complex bouquet of smells from the world outside. The dominant notes are mud, wet animals, and the lingering aroma of 100 other chamber pots that have already been emptied this morning. You look down. The street below, if you can call it a street, is a narrow, paved lane of churned mud and muck. There is no gutter, no sewer system. The street itself is the sewer. You pick up the pot again. This is the crucial moment. A moment of strange, almost comical, civic responsibility. You lean your head out just slightly, look left, then right. The lane is empty. It's still too early for most people to be about. This is good. It makes things simpler. But if there were people walking by, you would be expected to give a warning. A loud, clear shout. Guard is leaving. Beware the water. It's a phrase that has echoed through the narrow lanes of cities for generations, a brief, shouted courtesy before adding to the filth below. Historians, looking at town ordinances from the period, are in a gentle disagreement about how chaotic this really was. Some town councils tried to regulate it, demanding that waste only be thrown out at certain times, or imposing fines on those who soiled their neighbors without warning. But enforcing such rules in a crowded, anonymous town was nearly impossible. So the shouted warning was often the only law that mattered. It was a system of personal responsibility, a messy and imperfect agreement between neighbors. But for you, this morning, the coast is clear. With a practiced motion, you hoist the heavy pot to the edge of the window frame. You take a breath, not because of the smell, but to brace yourself. Then you tip. A thick, brownish-yellow arc streams from the pot and plummets to the ground below. It lands with a series of wet, percussive splashes, adding a new, steaming layer to the sludge. You watch it for a moment as the liquid seeps into the mud, leaving the more solid components behind to join the rest of the street's debris. You have made your morning's contribution to the communal river of waste. You bring the now much lighter pot back inside. It's not clean, of course. By residue clings to the inside. You might give it a quick rinse with a splash of water later, but for now, you simply place it back in its designated spot under the bed, ready for the day's use. The shutter is swung back into place, the wooden bar dropped, and the room is once again plunged into near darkness. The brief, foul-smelling transaction with the outside world is complete. The air inside is now tinged with the fresh smell from the street, a reminder of what lies just beyond your walls. But there's no time to dwell on it. The room is cold. The children will be waking soon, and you need to make a fire. With the world outside sealed away again, the cold in the room seems to settle more deeply into your bones. The brief exposure to the morning air has stolen what little warmth lingered from the night. Your breath now appears as a faint, ghostly plume in the gloom. The children are still sleeping, their small bodies curled into tight balls for warmth. But they won't stay that way for long. Your next task is the most essential of the morning. It is the taming of the beast, the creation of the heart of your home for the day, the fire. You move to the center of the room, where a shallow, circular pit is lined with a few large, blackened stones. This is the hearth. It is the center of your universe. It is your stove, your furnace, your only source of light for the long evenings. Kneeling on the hard earth, you begin the delicate process. First, hope. You gently push the soft, powdery ash aside with your bare hands, searching for a miracle. Sometimes, if the fire was banked just right the night before, a tiny, determined ember can survive, a little reed jewel buried in the grey. Finding one would make this whole process 100 times easier. You sift and search, your fingers turning grey. But there is nothing. The fire is truly dead. A small, internal sigh. You'll have to build it from scratch. From a small niche carved into the wattle and daub wall, you retrieve your tools. A small leather pouch holds your fire starting kit. Inside is a chunk of flint, its edges sharp, a C-shaped piece of hard steel, and most precious of all, a small, tightly sealed tin box. You open the box carefully. It contains your tinder, scraps of blackened, fragile cloth known as char cloth, and a tuft of dried moss. You arrange a small, fluffy nest of the moss in the center of the hearth. On top of it, you place a single promising piece of char cloth. Now for the magic. You take the flint in one hand and the steel in the other. Holding the steel just over the tinder nest, you strike down with the flint. A sharp scraping sound, but no spark. You adjust your angle. Strike again. Another scrape. A third time, you strike hard and fast. A glancing blow of stone on metal. A tiny shower of brilliant orange sparks flies off the steel. One lands on the blackened edge of the char cloth. You hold your breath. It doesn't catch. You strike again. More sparks. One lands. And this time, a tiny red glow appears on the cloth, no bigger than a pinhead. It begins to spread, slowly, silently, eating its way across the blackened fibers. There is no flame yet, only this growing, magical spot of heat. You lean down, your face close to the cold ash, and blow. Not a hard puff of air, but a long, slow, gentle stream. The red glow brightens, turning a fierce orange. You continue to blow, your cheeks aching with the effort. A tiny wisp of smoke, acrid and sharp, rises to meet you. You carefully add a few slivers of dry wood shaving and a handful of the driest twigs you have. You blow again, and then, with a soft whoosh, a tiny, flickering yellow flame springs into existence. It is a moment of triumph. But the work is not done. The flame is a fragile newborn, and your home is now filling with its first breath, smoke. Thick, grey, eye-watering smoke. It doesn't rise gracefully upwards. There is no chimney here, no elegant brick flue to guide it out. Your only ventilation is a small, soot-rimmed hole in the center of the thatched roof directly above the hearth, and it is spectacularly inefficient. The smoke billows outwards, filling the small room from the top down. It stings your eyes, making them water. It catches in the back of your throat, and you let out a small, rasping cough. Within minutes, the air at head height is a thick, hazy effluge. You continue your work low to the ground, feeding larger and larger sticks to the growing fire, trying to stay below the worst of the cloud. This is your life. Scholars still wonder about the long-term effects of this. Skeletons from this era sometimes show signs of chronic respiratory ailments. Were you just coughing constantly, or had your body over a lifetime simply adapted to an environment that would send a modern person gasping for the door? It's one of those questions where the academic answer is likely less important than the simple reality. You did what you had to do to stay warm. A smoky house was better than a frozen one, and the smoke had its strange, unintended benefits. The constant blackening of the roofed embers and the thatch above helped preserve them, killing insects and preventing rot. Any meat you hung from the rafters would be slowly cured, absorbing the smoky flavor over weeks. It was a terrible system that worked in its own grimy, unhealthy way. The fire is now catching properly, the larger logs beginning to burn with a steady, reassuring roar. It throws off a welcome wave of heat, but it also throws off more smoke. The room is now a shifting landscape of grey haze. Your children's sleeping forms visible only as vague lumps. One of them stirs, letting out a small cough in their sleep. It is the sound of home, and now that you have heat, your thoughts turn to the next pressing need. The fire is no longer a fragile infant, but a hungry teenager greedily consuming the logs you feed it. The smoke in the room has stratified, creating a thick, hazy ceiling about 5 feet from the ground. Below it, the air is clearer and blessedly warmer. The orange light of the flames now pushes back against the gloom, casting flickering, dancing shadows on the wattle and daub walls. Your husband is beginning to stir, a low groan signaling his return to the world of the living. You don't walk to a pantry filled with choices. You walk to the same wooden chest that holds your clothes, At the other end of it, separated by a simple wooden divider, is your food supply. It is not a bounty. There is a small sack of rye flour, a shriveled onion, a handful of dried peas in a cloth bag, and a large, round, dark loaf of bread. You hoist the loaf out. It's heavy, dense, and has the texture of a petrified sponge. This is not the light, airy bread of a wealthy household, baked with fine white wheat flour. This is muslin bread, or something close to it. It's made from a mix of whatever grains were cheapest at the market, likely rye and barley, with maybe some oats or even ground-up beans mixed in to stretch the flour. It was baked a few days ago, either in a communal town of an or by you, and is already well on its way to becoming stale. Fresh, soft bread is a luxury, hard, chewy bread is reality. You take a small, sharp knife, the one you use for everything from eating to mending, and saw off to thick, rough slices. It takes a surprising amount of effort. The crust is a formidable barrier. You hand one chunk to your husband, who is now sitting up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and coughing lightly from the smoke. You tear the other piece in half for your two children, who are now beginning to wake, drawn by the sounds of movement and the growing warmth of the fire. This bread is breakfast. There is no butter, no jam. On a very good day, you might have a sliver of hard, salty cheese to go with it. But not today. Today, it is just bread. Dry, tough, and requiring a significant amount of jaw power to get through. To make it palatable, you need a drink. From a large ceramic jug in the corner, you pour a brownish, slightly cloudy liquid into 4 simple wooden cups. It's ale. Small ale to be precise. It's the staple drink for everyone in the household, including the children. This isn't the strong, intoxicating ale of the tavern. This is a weak, low-alcohol brew, made by Ray using the grain from a stronger batch. It's watery, but it's far safer to drink than the water from the local well or river, which could be contaminated with all manner of unpleasant things. The brewing process, the boiling of the water and the fermentation, kills the invisible dangers. Historians often debate the exact level of daily intoxication in the medieval world. Were you all just slightly tipsy all the time? The consensus is generally no. This small ale was likely no more alcoholic than a modern soft drink, and your body would have been well accustomed to it. It was hydration, not recreation, and for your children, it was a source of much-needed calories from the grain, a kind of liquid bread. You dip a corner of your hard crust into the cup of ale. The bread greedily soaks up the liquid, softening the unyielding crust and making it easier to chew. The taste is bland, slightly sour, with the unmistakable flavor of rye. You eat slowly, methodically. This is fuel, not pleasure. It is the necessary act of filling your stomach to prepare for a day of hard, physical labor. You watch as your children do the same, dunking their bread into their cups, their small faces serious with the task of eating. The fire crackles and pops, spitting the occasional ember out onto the dirt floor. Your husband eats in silence, staring into the flames, his mind likely already on the work he has to do today. It's a quiet domestic scene. There is no conversation, just the sounds of chewing, the crackle of the fire, and the low hum of a world slowly waking up outside your shuttered window. You finish your piece of bread and drink the last of the ale in your cup. Your stomach feels occupied, not full in a satisfying, warm sense that no longer of the early morning has been quieted. The first meal of the day is over. It was simple, unchanging, and probably took all of 5 minutes. Now that your family is fueled, the day's chores can begin in earnest. With the meager breakfast finished, the empty wooden cups are placed back on the shelf. There's no washing up to do, not in the modern sense. They'll be used again for the midday meal, and the dregs of ale will simply dry. Now, with a little fuel in your belly and the light from the fire pushing back the shadows, you can truly see the state of your floor. And it is, to put it mildly, a mess. Your home is a packed earth floor. Some of your slightly wealthier neighbors might have rough flagstones or wooden planks, but for you, it's the ground itself, compressed and hardened by years of use. Last night, in the dim light of the fire, you tossed the gnawed bones from dinner onto the floor for the dog to deal with. The dog now sleeping soundly by the hearth, has left a few greasy remnants behind. There are crumbs from your breakfast bread, a scattering of ash from a spitting log, and a general layer of dust and tracked-in dirt that is the baseline state of your existence. From a corner near the entrance, you grab your broom. It's not a fine, neatly trimmed broom of corn husks. It's a bundle of twigs, likely birch or heather, tied tightly around a thick, gnarled stick. It is a crude but effective tool, and with it, you begin the daily ritual of sweeping. You start at the edges of the single room and work your way towards the hearth. The motion is rhythmic, a wide, scraping arc. But you are not sweeping dust into a neat little pile to be collected in a pan and disposed of. What you are doing is more like rearranging the filth. The twig broom kicks up a cloud of fine dust that catches in the smoky air, making the light from the fire dance in swirling patterns. You are mostly just stirring things up, moving the larger debris around, and sending the smaller particles into the air to be inhaled or to settle again later. Then what are you sweeping exactly? The floor is not just dirt, it's a complex, organic layer, a kind of domestic compost pile. Over time, the ground has been covered with rushes or straw. This isn't for comfort, like a carpet, but for absorption. It soaks up spills, grease, mud, and anything else that ends up on the floor. In winter, it provides a thin but crucial layer of insulation against the cold ground. But it is not changed daily, not even weekly. You might add a fresh layer of rushes on top of the old one for a special occasion, like a saint's day or a visit from a relative. This practice of layering fresh vegetation over old filth created a kind of domestic archaeology in miniature. A famous scholar from a later era, Erasmus, visiting England, wrote with unconcealed disgust about this very thing. He described floors where the bottom layer had been left undisturbed for 20 years, harboring spit, vomit, spilled ale, dog waste, and all manner of other unspeakable things. Now, historians debate whether this was a universal horror or an exaggeration from a notoriously fastidious visitor. It's likely the truth lies somewhere in the middle. You are probably not living on to decades of accumulated grime. But you are certainly not sweeping a clean surface. The rushes on your floor are damp, trampled, and smell faintly of rotten old food. Your sweeping just breaks them down further, mixing them into the topsoil of your domestic life. You sweep the larger items, the bone fragments, a dropped onion skin, a clump of mud from a shoe, towards the fire, where you flick them into the flames with the end of your broom. They hiss and sizzle, adding a new, savory note to the smoky air. The rest of the dust and debris, you sweep not out the door, but simply towards the door. It will get tracked out eventually on the soles of your shoes, or you will periodically sweep the largest accumulations from the threshold directly into the street. There is no concept of a clean sweep. There is only a tedious state of being. You finish the task. The floor looks slightly better, more uniform in its dirtiness. The larger obstacles are gone. The air, however, is now thick with agitated dust, which you can feel coating the inside of your nose and the back of your throat. It's a thankless Sisyphean task. You know that within an hour, with the dog and the children and your husband moving about, the floor will be back to its previous state. But the ritual matters. Daily battle against the encroaching chaos and filth, a battle you will never truly win, but which you must fight every single day. And now you must venture out into the wider world, a world that makes your own floor look pristine by comparison. The inside of your home is now as ordered as it's going to get. The fire is burning, the floor is swept, and the family is fed. Now you must brave the world outside your door. You grab a pair of wooden buckets, their handles worn smooth and dark from years of use, and underneath the heavy plank door. The moment you pull it open, the full sensory reality of your town rushes in. It hits you first as a smell, a complex and overwhelming wave of odors that makes the smoky air of your home seem almost pleasant. The dominant scent is damp, decomposing organic matter. It's the smell of mud mixed with animal dung, rotting vegetables, and human waste. You step over the high threshold of your doorway, a feature designed to keep the worst of the street's muck from flowing inside during a heavy rain, and onto the street itself. Your soft leather shoes, which felt so practical on your packed earth floor, are immediately inadequate. They sink an inch into a thick, viscous sludge that coats the entire lane. This isn't just mud. It is a medieval slurry, a testament to a complete lack of sanitation. There are no paved surfaces, no drains, no sewers. The narrow lane between the jet-tied upper stories of the houses is a perpetual twilight zone, rarely touched by direct sunlight. The ground never truly dries. Every household, like yours, has thrown its waste from the night out of the window. Animals, pigs, chickens, dogs, roam freely, adding their own contributions to the mix. A tenner down the lane might have discarded a bucket of foul-smelling liquid containing animal fat and urine. A butcher, a few doors the other way, likely tossed a bucket of blood and offal into the street yesterday. It all mixes together into a thick, stinking gumbo that coats everything. You begin to walk, your steps practiced and careful. This is not a casual stroll. It is a journey of navigation, a constant series of micro-decisions to avoid the worst of the hazards. You keep to the very center of the lane. This is a strange but common practice. The middle of the street is often the highest point, a slight crown in the road. This is because people would build up their own walkways directly in front of their houses with gravel, stones, or wooden planks, trying to create a small island of stability. The result is that the center of the lane becomes a channel for the worst of the liquid filth. But today, after a day with no rain, the center is merely a treacherous ridge of semi-solid muck, which is still preferable to the deeper, more liquid pools that have collected on either side. A pig, its snout covered in grime, snorts and trots past you, completely at home in this environment. These semi-wild town pigs are a common sight. They are a walking, snorting sanitation department, consuming a good portion of the organic waste that would otherwise pile up even higher. They are useful, but also a menace, known for knocking over children and causing chaos. Historians are still trying to piece together a complete sensory map of the medieval street. While written accounts often focus on the overwhelming stench, visual and auditory evidence is harder to find. What did it sound like? The squelch of your own feet, the grunt of the pig, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the cry of a merchant hawking his wares. Visually, it was a world of browns and greys, the timber-framed houses looming over you, their wattle and daub walls stained and grimy. It was dark, claustrophobic, and utterly inescapably dirty. You see a neighbor a few doors down, tossing a bucket of fish guts into the lane. He gives you a brief nod, which you return. This isn't an act of malice or laziness. It's simply the way things are done. Where else would it go? There is no concept of public waste collection. The street is the only option, a communal dumping ground that is periodically, and often ineffectively, cleaned by rains or, on rare occasions, by hired laborers before a festival or a visit from a local lord. You jump over a particularly vile-looking puddle, your heavy wool skirts swishing dangerously close to the surface. Keeping your clothes clean in this environment is a constant, losing battle. The hems of women's dresses were often the first things to rot away, perpetually damp and soiled. You hold your buckets high, trying to keep your balance. Every step is a risk, a potential slip. The ditching is only 100 yards away, but it feels like a perilous expedition. You are on your way to the well, the source of the water you will use for drinking, cooking, and if you are very ambitious, washing. You can only hope that what you find there is cleaner than the path you took to reach it. After a careful, muck-avoiding journey, you arrive at the heart of your small neighborhood. The communal well. It stands in a slightly more open square where several lanes meet, a space that serves as a public courtyard. The well itself is a low, circular stone wall, about waist high, with a wooden roof structure above it to keep out the worst of the falling leaves and bird droppings. A thick, hairy rope is coiled around a wooden axle, with a large wooden bucket attached to the end. This well is your lifeline. It is the central hub of the community, especially for the women. It's where you get your water, but it's also where you get your news. Several other women are already there, chatting as they wait their turn. One is bouncing a baby on her hip while another rests her full buckets on the stone lip of the well, catching her breath before the long walk home. The air here is filled with the sound of the creaking windlass, the splash of the bucket, hitting the water far below, and the low hum of gossip. It's your turn. You set down your own buckets and take hold of the smooth, worn handle of the windlass. You begin to turn, unwinding the rope and lowering the well bucket into the dark, circular void. It descends with a rattling sound, the rope scraping against the wood, until you hear a distant, hollow plonk as it hits the water. Now for the hard part. You reverse the motion, cranking the handle to bring the heavy, water-filled bucket back up. Your shoulders and back strain against the weight. This is a significant part of your daily physical labor. A household of four can use a surprising amount of water, and you will make this trip several times a day. Each time involves this same muscle-straining effort. As the bucket emerges into the light, you can see the water. It is water. It's mostly clear, but not entirely. You peer into the bucket as it rests on the wellhead. A few stray leaves float on the surface, along with some unit unfightable bits of organic matter. A pale ghostly worm no longer than your thumbnail wriggles near the surface before you flick it out with a finger. You try not to think too hard about the source of this water. You are in a town. A crowded town with a church graveyard not too far away, and dozens of cesspits, essentially holes dug in the ground for human waste, in the backyards of the houses. The well draws its water from the ground, the very same ground that everything else is seeping into. The concept of groundwater contamination, of invisible bacteria and pathogens, is a complete mystery to you. Your understanding of water quality is purely sensory. Does it look clear? Does it taste normal? If it passes those three tests, it's considered safe. Historians and archaeologists, through the science of paleofeces and soil analysis, have painted a grim picture of the water in many medieval towns. They have found evidence of various intestinal parasites, like roundworm and whipworm, which were likely endemic. You and everyone you know probably have a low-level parasitic infection. It's just part of life, contributing to the general state of poor health and malnutrition that is your baseline. You wouldn't attribute them to the water you're drinking. You'd probably blame it on an imbalance of your humors, or perhaps a spell of bad air. There's an ongoing academic discussion about the extent to which people knew certain water sources were bad. While the germ theory of disease was centuries away, there seems to have been an empirical understanding that water from a clear, fast-flowing stream was better than water from a stagnant pond. People weren't stupid. They could make connections between drinking foul-tasting water and getting sick. But in a town, your choices were limited. You carefully tip the large well bucket, filling your two smaller buckets. Water sloshes over the sides, splashing onto your leather shoes and the hem of your dress, adding a layer of clean dampness over the existing layer of street muck dampness. You rest for a moment, exchanging a few pleasantries with the woman next in line. You talk about the price of eggs, the health of a neighbor's cow. This is the social fabric of your life, woven together over the daily necessity of fetching water. Then you bend your knees, take a firm grip on the two heavy, sloshing buckets and stand. The weight is immense, pulling at your arms and shoulders, and now you must make the treacherous journey back, trying not to spill a single precious drop of this questionable but essential liquid. The walk home is always harder, slower, and more perilous than the walk to the well. The walk home with the heavy, sloshing buckets of water is an exercise in controlled agony. Your arms feel like they're being pulled from their sockets, and your every step is a calculation of balance and momentum. You finally reach your doorway, muscles screaming in protest, and carefully maneuver the buckets over the high threshold. You've only spilled a little, a victory. You set the water aside for later use. But your work in the wider world is not yet done. Your husband has left for his own labor, and the children are now occupied, playing a simple game with knuckle bones on the floor. You need to secure the ingredients for tonight's meal. You grab a small, woven basket and a few precious, grimy coins from a hiding place and step back out into the street. This time you are heading for the market. It is the commercial and social epicenter of the town, and on a market day, it is a chaotic, overwhelming assault on the senses. As you get closer, the generalized stench of the streets is replaced by a more specific, and even more intense tapestry of smells. You can smell the market long before you can see it. The first smell is the livestock. A pen of sheep bleats nervously, their thick, oily wool smell hanging heavy in the air. Next to them, a flock of chickens clucks and scratches in a dusty enclosure, adding the sharp, ammonia scent of their droppings to the mix. These animals are not neatly packaged in refrigerated trucks. They are here, alive and pungent, just yards from where you will be buying your food. You push your way into the crowded square. The ground here is even more churned up than in the residential lanes, a thick soup of mud, dung, and spilled produce. The sound is a cacophony. Merchants shouting to advertise their wares, housewives haggling over prices, the squeal of a pig being led to slaughter, the laughter of children, the barking of dogs. It is the sound of commerce at its most raw. You navigate through the throng, your eyes scanning the makeshift stalls. A woman sits on a stool behind a pile of lumpy, earth-encrusted carrots and turnips. A baker has a stall with loaves of bread, buzzing with a halo of flies that he occasionally swats at with a dirty cloth. A man with a cart is selling eels, living writhing in a barrel of murky water. Your destination is the butcher's stall, or the shambles, as the meat-selling district is often called. And the smell here is in a league of its own. It's a thick, coppery, metallic smell of blood, mixed with the sweet, cloying scent of raw meat starting to turn in the air. The butcher is a large man with a bloody apron and brawny arms. He works on a massive, hollowed-out log that serves as his chopping block, its surface stained black with old blood. Carcasses of sheep and pigs hang from hooks, their unclined heads still attached, their eyes glassy. There is no refrigeration. The meat is simply exposed to the open air, the sun, the dust, and the ever-present swarms of fat black flies. The butcher periodically shoos them away, but it's a futile gesture. They land on the meat, on his bloody knives. This complete lack of hygiene is something historians often have to stress. Our modern sensibilities are so trained to see a fly on food as a sign of contamination that it's hard to comprehend a world where it was simply an unavoidable constant. Scholars who study disease transmission in this period point to places like this as a major vector. But for you, the flies are just part of the scenery. A bigger concern is the freshness of the meat itself. You have a keen eye and an even keener nose for this. You can tell by the color of the flesh, the texture of the fat, and, most importantly, the smell, whether a piece of meat is merely a day old or teetering on the edge of being truly rotten. Town regulations often existed to try and prevent the sale of putrid meat, but butchers' waremasters are disguising their older stock, perhaps by rubbing it with salt or masking the smell with herbs. The principle of caveat temptor, let the buyer beware, was the law of the land. You watch as the butcher hacks a piece of mutton from a carcass for another customer. He doesn't use a scale. He just estimates the weight, a skill honed over a lifetime. The transaction is completed with a transfer of coins from a dirty hand to a bloody one. You are here for a cheaper cut, something that can be boiled for a long time to kill whatever might be living on it, and to tenderize the tough, sinewy flesh. You brace yourself and step forward to begin the delicate and disgusting process of haggling. You point a hesitant finger towards a flank of mutton hanging from a hook. It's a less desirable cut, stringy and attached to a large section of bone. The color is a deep purplish red, not the bright pink of truly fresh meat, but it doesn't look green or gray, which is a good sign. The cloud of flies currently feasting on it seems particularly enthusiastic. How much for that piece? You ask, your voice raised to be heard over the din of the market. The butcher glances at it, then at you, his eyes making a quick, professional assessment of your clothes, your basket, your apparent level of desperation. For you, a penny and a half, he grunts, wiping a bloody hand on his already saturated apron. You scoff a practiced, theatrical sound of disbelief. A penny and a half. For that, look at the bone on it. It's more bone than meat, and the flies will carry it away if you don't sell it soon. This is the ritual, the dance of the market. He knows you won't accept the first price, and you know he started high. The haggling begins in earnest. You argue about the amount of fat, the age of the sheep it came from, the general state of the world. It's a performance. Finally, after a few minutes of back and forth, you settle on a price. 1 penny. It's still more than you wanted to pay, but it's what you can afford. The butcher takes the piece down from the hook. He slaps it onto his grate, blood-soaked log, and, with a few powerful blows from a heavy cleaver, hacks off a chunk for you. He doesn't wrap it in clean paper. There is no clean paper. He simply picks up the slab of meat, warmish, slick, and slightly sticky to the touch, and plops it directly into your woven basket, onto the bed of root vegetables you've already purchased. The flies, momentarily disturbed by the transaction, follow the meat and settle comfortably into their new home in your basket. You hand over your precious, grimy coin. He takes it without a word, his bloody thumb smearing dirt onto the king's face, and drops it into a leather pouch at his belt. The deal is done. You now own a questionable piece of meat. As you turn to leave the shambles, you try not to think too hard about the journey this meat has taken. The animal was likely slaughtered right here in the market or in a nearby yard. The process would have been messy and brutal. The ground in this area is permanently soaked with the blood and effluence of countless animals. The butcher's tools are rarely, if ever, washed, moving from carcass to carcass, spreading whatever bacteria they harbor. This is a point of some academic debate. How aware were people of the dangers of cross-contamination? While they didn't understand germ theory, they certainly understood that rotten meat could make you sick. This is why cooking methods were so important. Boiling and stewing, cooking meat for hours until it was falling off the bone, was not just about making tough cuts tender. It was a vital, if unintentional, form of sterilization. Roasting a piece of meat rare was a privilege of the very wealthy, who could afford the freshest, highest quality cuts from animals slaughtered on their own estates. For you, a long, slow boil is the only way. There is also the ever-present, nagging question of where the meat actually came from. Was it a healthy sheep? Or was it an old, diseased ewe that a farmer sold cheap to the butcher before it died on its own? Worse tales abounded in medieval towns of unscrupulous butchers passing off the meat of dogs, cats, or even rats as more desirable fare. These stories were likely exaggerated cautionary tales, but the fear was real enough. Food adulteration was a serious crime, and punishments could be severe, from being put in the stocks and pelted with your own rotten food to being banished from the town entirely. But it still happened. You have to trust your own judgment and your relationship with the butcher. You bought from this man before. He hasn't poisoned you yet. That's the closest you can get to a guarantee. You clutch your basket, the weight of the meat a heavy, grim presence. You begin the journey back through the chaotic market, eager to get this raw, fly-covered purchase back to the relative safety of your own hearth, where you can hopefully boil it into something edible, and more importantly safe. The midday meal is approaching, and you are starting to feel the familiar pangs of hunger once again. You finally make it back inside, your arms aching, and set the basket down on the floor. The smell of the raw meat and the dusty root vegetables immediately joins the symphony of odors in your small home. The children look up from their game, their faces expectant. The sun, judging by the single, bright sliver of light coming from a crack in the shutter, is high in the sky. It is the middle of the day. The grand piece of mutton is for the evening meal, a long stewing affair that will take hours. The midday meal needs to be simpler, quicker. It needs to be what is already there. Your eyes turn to the great, black-bellied iron pot that hangs on a hook over the fire. It is the most valuable single object you own, and it is the tireless workhorse of your kitchen. It is the pottage pot. The pot is never empty, and it is never, ever truly cleaned. It is in a state of perpetual simmering existence. This is the very definition of pottage or perpetual stew. Last night, you added water and the last of the vegetables to the remnants of the day before. This morning, before you left, you pushed it to a cooler part of the hook so it wouldn't burn. Now you use a long wooden stick to nudge it back over the heart of the flames. You take the grimy turnip and the small, sad-looking carrot from your basket. You give them a quick, perfunctory rinse in a bowl of the water you just hold, rubbing the worst of the dirt off with your thumb. You don't peel them. That would be wasteful. Skin is food. Using your small, all-purpose knife, you chop them into rough, uneven chunks and drop them directly into the big iron pot. They disappear with a soft plop into the thick, bubbling liquid already within. What is that liquid? It's a mystery, a culinary history of the past few days. The base is water and whatever grain you had to thicken it, oatmeal, barley, even breadcrumbs. In it are the ghosts of meals past. The wilted cabbage from yesterday, the handful of dry peas from the day before, perhaps a bony piece of salt fish that was boiled until it disintegrated into the mix. It is a thick, greyish-brown, lumpy slurry. It is the fuel that runs your family. After letting the new additions bubble for a few minutes, you deem it ready. Using a long-handled ladle carved from a single piece of wood, you scoop the pottage out of the pot. You don't ladle it into 3 separate bowls. You earn 3 separate bowls, but that's not how this works. You ladle the stew into one large, shallow wooden bowl known as a treen, which you place in the middle of the floor. You and the 2 children gather around it. There are no spoons laid out. Your primary eating utensil is a piece of the same hard, stale bread from this morning. You break off a chunk and use it as a scoop, a sop. You dip it into the communal bowl, soaking up the hot, thick liquid and maneuvering a lump of soft-cooked vegetable onto it. Then you lift the soggy, dripping bread to your mouth. The taste is indescribable, mostly because it lacks any distinct flavor. It tastes earthy from the unpeeled root vegetables. It tastes faintly of smoke from the fire. It tastes of boiled grain. It is lukewarm, thick, and filling. Every mouthful is a slightly different texture. The mushy turnip, a surprisingly firm pea, the gritins of the oatmeal. Historians often engage in a quiet debate about the flavor profile of the peasant diet. Was it truly this bland, a monotonous daily grind of boiled starches? Or did you, as the cook, take a quiet pride in your pottage, adding wild garlic or foraged herbs like thyme or marjoram to give it some character? Perhaps you had a small pot of herbs growing by the door. But herbs cost money or time to gather, and on a day like today, functional is all you can manage. The goal of this meal is not pleasure, it is the temporary silencing of a hungry stomach. You eat in silence, focused on the task. The children, well practiced, dip their own bread into the shared bowl, careful not to get in your way. There is an unspoken etiquette to the communal bowl, a rhythm of dipping and eating that prevents collisions. When the bread gets too soggy to function as a scoop, you simply eat it and tear off a new piece. Soon the bowl is empty, scraped clean by the last pieces of bread. The meal is over. It was efficient and produced almost no washing up. The single wooden bowl is given a quick wipe with a cloth, or perhaps a lick from the dog, and put away. Your family has been refueled. The dull ache of hunger in your stomach has been replaced by the heavy, stolid presence of the pottage. It will get you through the afternoon, and the afternoon holds one of the most physically demanding chores of your week. With the midday meal settled heavily in your stomach, your thoughts turn to the pile of soiled linen in the corner. It's not a large pile, your husband's other shirt, your other shift, the children's garments, but it represents an afternoon of grueling, back-breaking labor. Laundry is not a simple task of loading a machine. It is a battle, a chemical and physical assault on dirt. You gather the clothes into a large, sturdy basket. You also collect your tools, a small bucket of soft, greyish soap and a heavy, smooth piece of wood shaped like a paddle called a washing bat or beetle. The soap is your own creation, a foul-smelling but effective concoction. You made it by boiling animal fat, waste from the butcher or your own cooking, with wood ash and a little water. The result is a soft, gelatinous lye soap. It's incredibly caustic, capable of stripping grease and grime from fabric, but also stripping the natural oils from your skin. You heave the heavy basket onto your hip and head back out the door, this time taking a different path, one that leads away from the town centre and down towards the river. The river is the town's washing machine. It's also its bathtub and, for many, its toilet. As you get closer, you can hear the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of other women already at work. You find a spot on the muddy bank, near a set of large, flat stones that have been worn smooth by generations of this very activity. You don't just toss the clothes into the water. The river is murky, and you don't want your clothes to come out dirtier than they went in. First, you must pre-treat. You lay your husband's shirt, stained with sweat and dirt from his work, onto a flat rock. You scoop out a fat rock. You scoop out a fat rock. You scoop out a foul-smelling gob of your lice soap and smear it onto the worst of the stains, the collar. Then comes the most surprising, and to a modern mind, disgusting ingredient. You need an additional bleaching and stain-removing agent. From another, smaller pot, you pour a yellowish liquid over the soap. It's stale urine. You've been collecting it from the chamber pot for a week, letting it sit until the urea breaks down into ammonia. It is a powerful and free cleaning chemical. The smell is eye-watering, a sharp, biting stench of ammonia that cuts through the damp river air. This wasn't a strange or fringe practice. It was a standard part of laundry for centuries. Large-scale operations, like those run by fullers who processed wool, would pay people for their urine. Once the clothes are thoroughly soaked in this potent cocktail of lined ammonia, you let them sit for a bit, allowing the chemicals to do their work. Then you begin the physical part of the process. You wade into the cold river up to your knees, your wool skirt becoming heavy and sodden. You take the first garment, rinse it in the flowing water to get the worst of the cleaning agents out, and then lay it on a large, flat stone at the water's edge. You raise your wooden paddle, and you begin to beat the cloth. THWACK. Water and grime spray into the air. THWACK. You are not gently scrubbing. You are physically pounding the dirt out of the fabric's weave. It's a violent, repetitive, and exhausting motion. You work your way over the entire shirt, continue, and beating it again and again. Your arms burn, your back aches, but you continue the relentless rhythm. This is why clothes wear out so quickly. Historians examining surviving medieval textiles often marvel at the sheer number of patches and mends. This process, the combination of harsh chemical agents and brutal physical force, was incredibly hard on the fabric, but it was the only way to get it clean, or at least cleaner. After beating the life and the dirt out of the shirt, you give it a final rinse in the river, wringing it out with all your might. Twisting the heavy, wet linen is a final test of your strength. You repeat this entire, miserable process for every single item in your basket. Your hands, exposed to the lye soap, the ammonia, and the cold river water, are raw and dried, the skin cracked and stinging. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the basket is empty of soiled clothes and full of clean, dripping ones. The clean smell is not of lavender or fresh cotton. It's a strange, sterile, chemical smell of lined river water. You haul the incredibly heavy basket of wet laundry back up the bank and begin the long, slow walk home, where you'll have to find a place to hang it all to dry inside your smoky, one-room house. The laundry is done, and with it, a huge portion of your day's energy is gone. You stumble back into your home, the heavy basket of wet laundry seeming to weigh twice as much as it did on the way down to the river. Your arms are trembling with fatigue, your hands are a raw, stinging mess, and the hem of your skirt is soaked and muddy. You drop the basket to the floor with a sigh of profound weariness. The next problem immediately presents itself. Where to dry all of this? The sky outside is a flat, unforgiving grey. There is no sunshine to bleach the linens white and dry them quickly. Leaving them outside in the damp air would take days, and they'd likely be stolen or would be fouled by a passing animal, so you must dry them inside. You begin the laborious process of stringing a rope, made of twisted hemp, from one side of your small room to the other. You have to stand on a wobbly stool to secure it to the wooden beams, a precarious balancing act. Once the line is up, you begin to hang the wet, heavy garments. A shirt, your shift, the children's clothes. They hang limp and dripping, a damp curtain bisects your living space. The moisture from the clothes immediately changes the atmosphere in the room. The air, already thick with smoke, now becomes heavy and humid, like a sauna. Water drips steadily from the hems of the clothes onto the packed earth floor below, creating a series of small, dark puddles. The heat from the fire will help, turning your home into a low-temperature steam room, but it will still take at least a full day, maybe two, for the heaviest items to become truly dry. You will all live in this damp, dripping forest of laundry. With that task done, You turn your attention back to the evening meal. The piece of mutton is still sitting in the basket where you left it. You need to get the stew started. You walk over to the small area that serves as your food storage, a few shelves and a small wooden chest. You reach for the sack of grain, and your heart sinks. There is a hole, a small, ragged hole chewed into the side of the thick burlap sack. A small trickle of precious rye and barley flour dusts the shelf from the floor beneath it. You know immediately what this means. You pick up the sack, and you can feel that it's lighter than it should be. Peering inside, you see the telltale signs. A small nest of shredded burlap, and the small black droppings of a rat. A wave of cold, weary anger washes over you. This is a disaster. Not a dramatic, life-ending disaster, but a slow, grinding one. That grain was meant to last another 2 weeks. Now, a good portion of it is gone, eaten by the rat, and the rest is contaminated with its filth. Rats and mice are not cute pets or distant concepts. They are your direct competitors, your mortal enemies in the daily struggle for survival. They are a constant presence in every medieval home, from the poorest hovel to the grandest castle. They are drawn by the warmth of the hearth and the promise of food. They are clever, relentless, and almost impossible to get rid of. You might have a cat. A good mouser is a prized possession, a working member of the household. But even the best cat can't be everywhere at once. Traps exist, simple deadfalls or snares, but they are often ineffective against a truly determined rodent population. Historians studying medieval health and economy point to this constant, low-level loss of food as a major factor in the precariances of life. It wasn't just failed harvests that caused hunger, it was the daily, nibbling attrition from pests. Scholars still debate the psychological toll this must have taken. Did you feel a constant, simmering anxiety about your food stores? Or was it like the fleas and the lice, just another miserable fact of life that you simply had to accept? You sigh, a sound of pure exhaustion. You can't afford to throw the whole sack away. That would be unthinkable. You will have to salvage what you can. You carefully pour the remaining grain out onto a wooden board, picking out the worst of the droppings with your fingers. You know you can't get it all. You know that the flour you use for your bread tonight will contain things other than grain. You try not to think about it. You can't afford to think about it. This is just another small defeat in a day full of them. The never-ending dirt, the Sisyphon laundry, and now the thieving rat. Each one is a reminder of how fragile your existence is, how quickly a small bit of security can be eaten away. You brush the salvaged grain back into the sack, trying to ignore the feeling of revulsion. You still have a stew to make, and a family to feed. You just have a little less to do it with now. With the grain situation assessed and temporarily dealt with, you take a moment to sit. Just for a moment, you pull a low, three-legged stool closer to the hearth, avoiding the drips from the laundry, and sink onto it. The warmth of the fire feels good on your aching legs. The smoky, damp air is the air of home. For the first time today, you are not actively working, but your hands are never truly idle. From a small pouch tied to your belt, you retrieve your mending kit. It's not much. A few lengths of spun wool thread wrapped around a piece of wood, and a single precious needle. The needle is your most valuable personal tool. It's likely made of bronze or bone, thick and slightly crooked by modern standards. Losing it would be a small catastrophe. You handle it with the care it deserves. You pick up one of the children's woolen tunics from a small pile of clothes that need attention. It is a garment defined by its history of repairs. The elbows are thin, almost worn through. The hem is frayed, and there is a fresh tear near the shoulder, a snag from some rough and tumble play. Your task is to extend its life, to coax another few months of use out of the tired, worn fabric. You thread the needle, a difficult task in the dim light, holding it close to your face and squinting. The only light in the room comes from the fire in the single, small, unshuttered window. But window glass is an incredible luxury, far beyond your means. Your window is just a hole in the wall, perhaps covered with a piece of oiled parchment or thin shaved horn to let in a murky, translucent light while keeping out the worst of the wind. Today, in the name of light, you've left it open. The faint grey daylight that filters through is all you have to see by. You begin to sew. Your stitches are not fine and decorative. They are thick, strong, and utilitarian. You are not embroidering, you are performing surgery on tired cloth. You pull the ragged edges of the tear together and bind them with a series of looping stitches, creating a thick, raised scar on the fabric. When you get to the thinning elbow, you don't have a neat patch of matching fabric to sew over it. You simply weave your thread back and forth over the weak area, a technique called darning, creating a new, thick web of thread where the old wool has given way. This is the reality of clothing. It was not disposable. A single garment represented a huge investment of time and resources. The wool had to be sheared from sheep, cleaned, carded, spun into thread, dyed, and then woven into cloth on a loom. Every step was manual and labor-intensive. To simply discard a tunic because of a hole would be an act of unthinkable profligacy. You, and women like you, were the keepers of the household's textile wealth, the tireless guardians against entropy. Historians who study material culture often emphasize this make-do and mend philosophy. Garments were passed down from older sibling to younger, altered and patched until they were literally falling apart. When a piece of clothing was truly beyond repair, it would be cut up into rags for cleaning, or its fibers would be shredded and ray-spun into coarse, low-quality yarn. The light from the window begins to fade. The afternoon is waning. Your eyes strain in the growing dimmants, the flickering firelight casting deceptive shadows on your work. Your back is starting to ache from leaning over your sewing. You hold the tunic up, inspecting your work, the darker brown against the faded wool. The darned elbow is a thick, stiff lump. It is not beautiful, but it is strong. It will hold. The tunic will survive to be worn another day, to face another round of scrapes and snags. You bite the thread to cut it, a quick, automatic gesture, and put your precious needle safely back into its pouch. The brief respite of sitting is over. The sky is darkening, your husband will be home soon, and the mutton for the evening stew is still waiting, raw and fly-covered, in its basket on the floor. The busiest part of your day, the evening rush, is about to begin. As you push yourself up from the stool, a sharp stinging pain shoots through your palm. You look down. A small, splintered piece of wood from the stool's rough surface has embedded itself in the fleshy part of your hand, just below your thumb. A tiny, perfect bead of dark red blood wells up around it. You let out a quiet hiss of frustration. This is the last thing you needed. A small injury like this is not just a minor inconvenience, it is a potential gateway to disaster. In your world, there are no antiseptic wipes, no antibiotic creams, no sterile bandages. Every break in the skin is an open invitation for infection, and a simple infection can lead to a fever, blood poisoning, and a slow, agonizing death. You have seen it happen. Your first priority is to get the splinter out. You use your all-purpose knife, the same one you used for the vegetables, wiping the blade on your woolen skirt to clean it. You probe at the wound, your other hand steady, and with a grimace of pain, you manage to flick the tiny sliver of wood out. The wound bleeds a little more freely now, a good sign, you think. A chance for it to clean itself out. Now, you must treat it. Your medicine cabinet is not a cabinet at all. It's a small collection of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, and a bit of folk knowledge passed down from your mother. You look at your options. There is yarrow, known for its ability to staunch bleeding. There is comfrey, sometimes called nip-bone, believed to help wounds heal. And there is plantain, the common weed, whose leaves are thought to draw out poisons. You decide on a combination. You take a few dried comfrey leaves and a piece of yarrow and place them in a small, shallow bowl. Then you do something that would horrify a modern doctor. You begin to chew them. You chew the dry, brittle herbs, mixing them with your own saliva until they form a wet, greenish-brown pulp in your mouth. Saliva, you believe, has its own healing properties. This is a common practice, creating an instant, warm, moist poultice. Once the herbs are sufficiently masticated, you spit the resulting glob directly into the palm of your hand, covering the small, bleeding wound. The poultice is warm and smells vaguely of grass and your own spit, To hold it in place, you tear a strip of linen from a rag kept for this purpose, a rag of dubious cleanliness, and wrap it tightly around your hand. It is a crude, unsterile bandage, but it is the best you can do. This is the reality of medieval medicine for the vast majority of people. It was a mixture of practical herbalism, superstition, and what medical historians call the body's own wisdom. For every herb that had a genuine, if mild, medicinal property, and many did, there was a belief that was pure magic. Perhaps you murmur a small charm over the wound as you dressed it, calling on a saint to aid in the healing. Scholars are in a constant, gentle debate about the efficacy of these treatments. Did this poultice actually help? The answer is complicated. Some herbs like yarrow do have antiseptic and untold properties. The pressure from the bandage would help stop the bleeding. But the act of chewing the herbs and using spit introduced a massive amount of bacteria from your mouth directly into the wound. The unsterilized cloth was another source of contamination. You were simultaneously applying a mild medicine and a dose of potent bacteria. The fate of your hand now rests on a delicate battle between the healing properties of the herbs, your own immune system, and the sheer number of germs you've just introduced. You flex your bandaged hand. It throbs with a dull ache. You will have to work around it for the rest of the evening, keeping it as dry and clean as possible, which is a near impossible task in this house. You will watch it closely over the next few days. If it stays just a little sore and then heals, you will thank God in the herbs. If it becomes hot, swollen, and begins to ooze a yellowish pus, you will feel a cold, not of fear, form in your stomach. But for now, you have done what you can. You have applied the wisdom of your ancestors. The rest is out of your hands. The night outside is failing fast. You can hear the heavy tread of your husband's footsteps approaching the door. The day's labor is done, but his dirt is now coming home. The heavy wooden door groans open, and your husband feels the frame. He looks tired, bone-tired. His face, hands, and the front of his woolen tunic are covered in a fine layer of grime specific to his trade. Perhaps HES, a stonemason, covered in white dust or chemicals, or at unning of foul chemicals and animal hides, or simply a farm laborer, streaked with the good brown earth. Whatever his work, he brings it home with him, a walking testament to his day of toil. He steps inside, and the small room seems to shrink. He brings with him not just his physical presence, but an aura of the outside world, a gust of cool evening air, the smell of his labor, and a deep, weary hunger. He grunts a greeting which serves as a hello and a what's for dinner, all in one. He doesn't head for a shower. There is no shower. He walks over to the same small shelf where you washed your face this morning a lifetime ago. He picks up the clay pitcher of water you hold from the well and pours a generous amount into the shallow wooden bowl. He plunges his hands in, scrubbing at the layers of dirt. The water in the bowl immediately turns a dark, soupy gray. He rubs his hands together, snorting as he splashes the filthy water onto his face, scrubbing at his cheeks and beard. This is his evening ablution. He is not getting clean, not in any modern sense. He is simply removing the thickest, outermost layer of the day's filth. The grime under his fingernails will remain. The dust in his hair will stay. The sweat that has soaked into his clothes is a permanent resident until the next laundry day. When he's done, he grabs a piece of rough linen, the family towel, and dries his hands and face. The towel is already damp from your own use and is now streaked with a fresh layer of his specific dirt. He then walks over to the fire and slumps down onto the stool you just vacated, holding his hands out to the flames. He says nothing, simply staring into the fire, the day's exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders. The social dynamic of the medieval household is a subject of endless fascination and debate for historians. Was your home a partnership, a tyranny, or something in between? Surviving court records and letters suggest all of the above, but for most families like yours, life was likely a state of pragmatic, exhausted cooperation. He worked outside the home to bring in the coin or the food, and you worked inside and outside as you did today to keep the fragile machine of the household running. Conversation was a luxury. Shared, silent understanding of your mutual exhaustion was the norm. He kicks off his heavy leather shoes, which are caked in a thick layer of mud and whatever else he walked through today. He doesn't place them neatly by the door. He just leaves them where they lie on the floor, to lumps of drying mud that you will have to sweep around in the morning. The smells he has brought in now mingle with the existing scents of the room. His sweat, the dust of his trade, the mud on his shoes, they all join the smoke, the damp laundry, the raw meat, and the simmering pottage. The air is now a thick, complex stew of aromas, the olfactory signature of your life together. You watch him for a moment as he stares into the fire. His presence means the day is truly ending, that the time for the main meal is close. His hunger is now a tangible presence in the room, a silent pressure. It's up to you to satisfy it. You turn your attention back to the piece of mutton, which has been sitting patiently in its basket, gathering a fine sheen of airborne dust and smoke particles. Your hand throbs under its makeshift bandage. You ignore it. You have work to do. Most important culinary act of the day is about to begin. With your husband home and the expectation of a meal hanging in the air, you move with renewed purpose. The centerpiece of this evening's effort is the mutton. You take the slab of meat from the basket, trying to handle it with your uninjured hand. You give it a quick rinse in a bowl of water, the same water your husband just used to wash his face. The goal isn't to clean it, that's impossible. It's to wash off any surface dust or persistent flies. The water turns a pale, pinkish grey. You don't have a separate, clean cutting board. You use the same small, multi-purpose wooden board you used for the salvage grain earlier. You place the meat on it and with your trusty knife begin to cut it into smaller chunks, sawing through the tough, sinewy flesh and around the large piece of bone. Your bandaged hand protests, sending a dull, throbbing ache up your arm, but you work through it. Once the meat is butchered into sized pieces, you drop them, along with the large bone, directly into the perpetually simmering pottage pot. The bone is crucial. Over the long, slow cooking process, it will release its marrow and minerals, adding a rich, savory depth to the stew that the tough meat alone cannot provide. You give the pot a stir with a long wooden spoon, the chunks of mutton disappearing into the thick, greyish-brown liquid. Now for the vegetables. You retrieve the few remaining onions and the last of the dirty carrots from your basket. You don't peel them. You wipe them on your apron, lop off the very ends, and chop them into rough chunks, adding them to the pot. You throw in a handful of dried peas for good measure. Finally, the seasoning. You don't have a rack of exotic spices. Your seasoning is a pinch of precious, coarse grey salt, and perhaps a sprig of thyme you plucked from a pot outside your door. You stir it all together. The evening meal is now cooking. It will need to bubble away for at least an hour, maybe longer, for the mutton to become even remotely tender. The room grows darker. The only light now is the hypnotic, flickering dance of the flames in the hearth. The smoky, damp air is now thick with a new smell. The rich, savory aroma of stewing meat and onions. It is a smell that promises sustenance, a smell of comfort and survival. The children, sensing that dinner is approaching, abandon their game and sit near the fire, their small faces illuminated by the orange glow. The scene is almost peaceful, a classic image of rustic domesticity. But the reality is grimy. The smoke from the fire continues to fill the upper half of the room, stinging your eyes every time you stand up straight. The laundry drips. The floor is a mosaic of dirt and debris. Your hand throbs. And everyone in the room is in need of a bath. They will not get tonight. Historians often refer to this part of the day as the gloaming, the twilight time between the end of work and sleep. It was a time for chores that could be done by firelight, like mending or sharpening tools. It was also a time for storytelling. But tonight, there is only a weary silence, punctuated by the bubbling of the stew and the crackle of the fire. Finally, you deem the stew ready. The meat has been boiling for long enough that it should be safe and hopefully edible. Using a thick cloth to protect your hand from the hot iron handle, you swing the pot to a cooler spot on its hook. The meal is ready to be served. You follow the same ritual as the midday meal. You ladle the thick, lumpy stew into the single large wooden bowl. Chunks of mutton, soft-cooked carrots, and disintegrated peas swim in the thick, savory broth. You place it on the floor. You break off chunks of the hard rye bread. The family gathers around the communal bowl. Dinner is served. It is the climax of your day's labor, the reward for the endless struggle. The family gathers on the floor around the steaming wooden bowl, a small weary circle in the flickering firelight. The dog, who has been sleeping by the hearth, senses the change in atmosphere. His ears perk up, his tail gives a hopeful thump 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 thump, thump 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 thump, and he rises, stretching before trotting over to join the circle. He sits just outside the ring of humans, his intelligent eyes fixed on the bowl, a silent, patient sentinel of slumber. You, your husband, and the children begin to eat. Again you use chunks of the hard, dark bread as your primary utensil. You dip your sop into the thick stew, capturing a piece of meat or a soft vegetable, and bringing the dripping morsel to your mouth. The mutton is chewy, powerfully flavored, and still clinging stubbornly to threads of sinew. But after a day of bland pottage and dry bread, it tastes like a feast. The broth is rich and salty, warming you from the inside out. The eating is focused, almost silent. The only sounds are the slurping of the stew, the tearing of bread, and the occasional soft clink of a tooth against a piece of unexpected gristle. Your husband eats with a ravenous intensity, the hunger from his long day of labor making him efficient. The children, for their part, fish out the pieces of meat with grubby fingers, prioritizing the most valuable part of the meal. This is a world without napkins, without delicate table manners as we would know them. When your fingers get greasy, you wipe them on your bread or on your coarse woolen clothes. When a piece of gristle is too tough to chew, you discreetly spit it out, not onto a plate, but into your hand and then toss it into the rushes on the floor. And this is where the dog's role becomes clear. He is not just a pet, a companion, or a guard. He is a vital part of your sanitation system. When your husband finishes gnawing the last shreds of meat from a piece of bone, he doesn't look for a trash can. He simply tosses the bone over his shoulder. The dog, who has been waiting for this exact moment with the patience of a saint, snatches it out of the air with a soft clack of his teeth. He retreats to a corner to crunch on his prize, the sound of splintering bone providing a percussive accompaniment to the meal. The presence of domestic animals inside the home is a defining feature of your life. While the pigs and chickens are generally kept outside, the dog and the cat are indoor residents. They are working animals, but they are also part of the filth. The dog tracks in mud and whatever else is on the street. He sheds. He has fleas, which he generously shares with the rest of the household. He is rarely, if ever, washed. He is rarely, if ever, washed. But he is also incredibly useful. He eats the scraps you count, preventing them from rotting on the floor. He provides a living, breathing warning system against intruders, and he offers a simple, uncomplicated form of companionship in a world that is often harsh and isolating. Historians studying the human-animal bond find deep roots in arrangements like this. It was not a relationship of sentimentality, but of mutual, practical benefit. As the meal progresses, the floor around you becomes littered with discarded bits and pieces. A piece of onion your child didn't want, the aforementioned gristle, a shower of breadcrumbs, and now, the gnawed clean bone the dog has abandoned. It all just adds to the organic tapestry of your floor, ready to be trodden down into the rushes tomorrow morning when you perform your daily, superficial sweep. The family eats until the bowl is empty, until every last drop of the precious, meaty broth has been so pee-peed up with the last of the bread. Stomachs are full. The gnawing hunger has been beaten back for another night. The primary purpose of the day, to acquire and consume enough calories to survive, has been achieved. A deep, heavy lethargy begins to settle over the small group. But day is almost over. But there is still one final, monumental task to consider before sleep can be earned. With bellies full and the heavy warmth of the meal spreading through your limbs, a profound quiet settles over the room. The driving, urgent needs of the day, water, food, chores, have been met. The fire, now a bed of glowing orange embers, throws off a gentle, steady heat. This is the closest you will come all day to a moment of peace, of leisure. Your husband leans back against the wattle and daub wall, his eyes half closed. The children, sleepy and content, curl up on the floor near the hearth, their heads resting on the dozing dog, who makes a surprisingly good pillow. The dripping of the laundry has slowed to an occasional, soft plip, plop. In a wealthier household, this time might be filled with music from a lute, a game of chess, or reading from a rare, illuminated manuscript. For you, the entertainment is simpler. It is free, and it is ancient. It is the telling of a story. Perhaps it is your husband who begins, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. Or perhaps it is you, picking up a tale your own mother used to tell. The stories are not read from a book. You are likely illiterate, as are most people you know. The stories live in your memory, passed down through an oral tradition that stretches back for generations. Tonight, it might be a familiar folk tale, a story of a clever fox outwitting a proud wolf, or a brave peasant boy who tricks a giant. These are stories with simple, clear morals about the triumph of the weak and cunning over the strong and foolish. They are a source of comfort, a reflection of your own world where survival often depends on wit rather than strength. Or perhaps it's a more thrilling tale, a garbled, localized version of a grand romance. A story of a brave knight, his armor shining though in your version it's probably just rusty iron, who rescues a beautiful princess from a dragon. You've never seen a knight, or a princess, or a dragon, but the images they conjure are a powerful escape from the mud and grime of your daily life. Maybe it's a saint's life, a story of piety and miracles, the tale of a local saint who cured the sick or protected the town from a flood. These stories are a potent mix of entertainment and religious instruction, reinforcing the power of faith and the promise of divine intervention in a world governed by hardship and uncertainty. Or if the mood is right, it might be a ghost story, a chilling tale of a restless spirit that haunts the nearby woods, or the ghost of a miser who clankers his chains in the churchyard at midnight. These stories are told in a hushed whisper, the children pulling their blankets a little tighter, their eyes wide in the flickering firelight. As the storyteller speaks, the room is transformed. It is no longer just a small, smoky, one-room hovel. It is a forest, a castle, a heavenly court. The flickering shadows on the wall become giants and monsters. The howl of the wind outside the door is the cry of a vengeful spirit. For these few precious minutes, the relentless, grinding reality of your life is held at bay by the power of a shared narrative. Historians who study the culture of the common people place immense importance on this old tradition. It was the primary way that knowledge, values, and entertainment were transmitted. The exact content of these stories is often lost to us, only hinted at in the writings of the literate elite who sometimes recorded them, often with a tone of condescension. But scholars debate how much these stories shaped the popular imagination. Did you truly believe in the goblins and fairies of the tale? Or were they just a way to explain the unexplainable, to give a name to the creak of a floorboard or a strange shadow in the woods? The story ends. The final words hang in the quiet, smoky air. The spell is broken. The room is once again just a room. The children are nearly asleep. Your husband lets out a deep yawn. The day is well and truly over. The fire is dying. The cold is beginning to seep back in. And the thought that has been lurking at the back of your mind all day now comes forward. It is perhaps bath night. The last embers of the story die down, leaving a comfortable silence in their wake. Your husband stretches, a groan of weary muscles filling the room. He looks at you, then at the buckets of water you hauled this morning, and then back at you. An entire conversation happens in that single, shared glance. It's been a week. The accumulated grime of 7 days of labor feels like a physical weight on your skin. It is time. It is bath night. A collective internal sigh is felt by all. A bath is not a relaxing, spa-like experience. It is a monumental chore, a project that will require the coordinated effort of the entire household and consume the last dregs of everyone's energy. The first step is the vessel. From a corner of the room, or perhaps from outside, leaning against the wall, you retrieve the tub. It's a large, shallow wooden barrel, perhaps cut in half, bound with iron hoops. It is heavy and awkward. You and your husband grunt and heave, dragging it into the center of the room near the hearth. Now for the water. The 2 buckets you fetched this morning are a start, but they are not nearly enough. You will need at least 4 or 5 more buckets to create a respectable depth in the tub. So you and your husband must make another trip, this time in the pitch dark, to the communal well. You take a burning piece of wood from the fire to use as a makeshift torch. Its flickering light casting long, dancing shadows as you navigate the treacherous, mucky street one last time. The town is silent and dark, everyone else already asleep in their homes. The trip to the well and back, hauling the heavy, sloshing buckets, is an exhausting ordeal. By the time you have enough water, you are both sweating and out of breath. You pour the frigid water into the wooden tub. The next and most time-consuming part of the process begins. Heating it. You do not pour the cold water into the great iron pottage pot to heat it on the fire. That would make the stew pot greasy and require a massive cleaning effort. Instead, you use a more direct, if somewhat hazardous method. You take several large, smooth stones from the edge of the hearth. These are your heating stones. Using a pair of crude iron tongs, you place them directly into the glowing embers of the fire. You build the fire up again, adding more wood, until it is roaring once more. The stones sit in the heart of the flames, slowly absorbing the intense heat. You wait. This process takes a long time. The children who were on the verge of sleep are now awake again, watching the preparations with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Finally, when the stones are glowing a dull, angry red, they are ready. This is the most dangerous part of the operation. Your husband, using the long iron tongs, carefully retrieves the first stone from the fire. It radiates a shimmering, intense heat. He moves with extreme care from the hearth to the tub. A single slip could result in a catastrophic burn or a cracked tub. He lowers the glowing stone into the cold water. The moment the stone hits the water, the room explodes with noise and steam. A loud, violent hiss fills the air as the cold water boils instantly where it touches the superheated rock. A thick cloud of steam erupts, filling the already smoky, humid room with a dense, white fog. It smells of hot rock and clean steam. You repeat this process, stone by glowing stone, until the water in the tub is no longer frigid, but a lukewarm, tolerable temperature. Historians and experimental archaeologists have recreated this process, and they all agree on two things. It is incredibly labor-intensive, and it is remarkably effective at heating water. It's a simple, ingenious use of thermodynamics, but the debate continues about frequency. How often did a family like yours really go through this whole ordeal? Weekly? Monthly? Only on major holidays? The answer likely varied wildly depending on wealth, location, and personal preference. The effort feels immense. The bath is ready, but you will not be the first to use it. The water in the tub is finally warm, or at least not shockingly cold. A gentle mist rises from its surface, mingling with the smoke and the steam from the laundry. The room is now a veritable swamp of humidity. The bath is ready, and the strict, unspoken hierarchy of the household dictates the order of bathing. Your husband goes first. As the head of the household, the primary laborer, he gets the privilege of the cleanest water. He strips off his single layer of grimy woolen clothes, leaving them in a heap on the floor. He stands naked for a moment in the firelight, a pale, weary figure, his skin etched with the dirt of his trade. He steps into the tub and lowers himself into the water with a groan of satisfaction. The tub is small. He can't lie back and luxuriate. He can only sit, knees bent up to his chest, the water coming up to his waist. He uses a small wooden bowl to scoop water and pour it over his head and shoulders. He doesn't have a personal bar of soap. He uses a piece of the same harsh, lye-based soft soap that you used for the laundry. He scrubs himself vigorously, the dirt and grime of a week's labor dissolving into the water, turning it from mostly clear to a murky, translucent gray. He washes his hair, rubbing the soap into a lather before dunking his head under the water to rinse. After a few minutes of this vigorous scrubbing, he is done. He stands, water streaming from his body, and steps out of the tub onto the cold, damp earth of the floor. He grabs the single, shared family towel, a rough piece of linen that is already damp, and gives himself a quick, abrasive rub down. Clean, or at least cleaner, he puts on his sleeping shift and retreats to the straw mattress to finally rest. Now, it is the children's turn. You call them over. They shed their own small, dirty tunics. One at a time, you lift them into the now grey, slightly scummy water that their father has just vacated. They splash and play for a minute, the novelty of the water overcoming their sleepiness. You take a cloth and the same piece of soap and give them a quick, efficient scrubbing, washing their hair and behind their ears. They are small, so the process is quick. You lift them out, one by one, dripping and shivering, and dry them with the same, now even damper, family towel. They scamper off to their own small sleeping pallets near the fire, clean and ready for sleep. The water in the tub is now a truly unpleasant sight. It is an opaque, brownish grey, with a film of soapy scum and loose hairs floating on the surface. It is substantially cooler than when it started. And now, it is your turn. This practice of sharing bathwater, from the head of the household down to the lowest ranking member, is one of the most visceral examples of medieval hygiene. It was born of pure practicality. The effort required to haul and heat the water was so immense that to discard it after one use was an unthinkable waste. You didn't think of it as bathing in someone else's dirty water. You thought of it as using the warm water. Historians debate the actual hygiene benefits of being the last in line. Were you getting cleaner at all? Or were you simply marinating in a warm soup of your family's collected filth? It's a rather grim academic question. While you were certainly washing away your own sweat and dirt, you were simultaneously being exposed to whatever bacteria and skin ailments the rest of your family might have. It was a microbial exchange, a family-sized petri dish. You take off your own clothes, your body aching with the accumulated fatigue of the day. You look at the tub of cold, greasy, scummy water. This is your reward for a day of relentless, back-breaking labor. With a sigh of resignation, you step in. You lower yourself into the tub, and a shiver immediately runs through you. The water is now decidedly cold. The residual heat from the stones is long gone, and all that remains is a tub of tepid, dirty water. It feels greasy against your skin. You sit, knees hugged to your chest, trying to submerge as little of yourself as possible. There is no pleasure in this. It is a purely functional, unpleasant task to be endured. You take the piece of lye soap, now worn down and slippery, and begin to wash. You scrub your arms, your legs, your body, trying to work up a lather in the cold, hard water. The soap doesn't foam so much as it just smears a thin, slick film over your skin. You can feel the grit and grime in the water itself. It's less like a bath and more like an abrasive scrub with silty, soapy mud. You wash your hair, dunking your head into the scummy water to rinse. You come out sputtering, strands of your children's and husband's hair now clinging to your face. You try not to think about it. You just want this to be over. You finish as quickly as you can, your teeth beginning to chatter from the cold. The brief, marginal benefit of becoming slightly cleaner is now being rapidly outweighed by the deep, bone-chilling cold. You stand up, shivering uncontrollably, and step out of the tub. The air in the room, which felt so humid and warm before, now feels frigid against your wet skin. You grab the family towel. It is now completely sodden, a heavy, damp, and dirty rag. Using it is less like drying yourself and more like smearing the water and filth around into a more uniform layer. It does little to warm you. You drop the useless towel and quickly pull on your linen sleeping shift, the thin, dry cloth clinging unpleasantly to your still damp body. Your bath is over. But the ordeal is not. The tub, filled with its 50 or 60 pounds of filthy, heavy water, still sits in the middle of your floor. You cannot leave it there overnight. It would be in the way, and by morning, the smell would be unbearable. It must be emptied. This is your job. Your husband is already in bed, his duty done. You look at the heavy tub, then at the door. There is no drain in the floor. The only way to empty it is bucket by painstaking bucket. You grab one of the empty pails. You dip it into the tub, filling it with the foul grey water, and begin the arduous process of hauling the bath water outside. You stagger to the door, open it to the pitch-black night, and heave the contents of the bucket into the street. It lands with a loud, echoing splash in the muck, a final watery contribution to the day's filth. You turn around and go back for another bucket tuck, and another after that. Each trip is an exercise in weary misery. Your muscles, already fatigued from a day of laundry and hauling water, are now screaming in protest. Your bandaged hand throbs with every bucket you lift. By the time the tub is empty, save for a sludgy, gritty residue at the bottom, you are completely and utterly spent. You drag the empty, heavy tub back to its corner, your last ounce of strength gone. The entire process of the relaxing evening bath has taken nearly 2 hours. 2 hours of hauling, heating, waiting, bathing in filth and more hauling. It is a perfect microcosm of your life. An incredible amount of labor for a very marginal reward. Historians who specialize in women's work from this period emphasize the sheer, relentless physicality of it all. Without modern conveniences, every single task, from making a fire to washing clothes to taking a bath, was a significant expenditure of time and energy. It's a reality that is often glossed over in romantic depictions of the past. There was no rest, there was only a brief pause between Herculean labors. You stand for a moment in the center of the now quiet room. The fire is just a few faint, pulsing embers. The laundry is still dripping. The air smells of wet wool, damp earth, and stale bathwater. You are cleaner, perhaps, but you are also colder and more exhausted than you were before. There is only one place left to go. You are standing in the near darkness, a damp, shivering ghost in your own home. The colossal effort of the bath is over. The fire is a faint, hypnotic pulse of red. Your family is already lost to the world, their soft breathing the only sound in the room besides the slow, rhythmic drip. 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 Drip of the laundry. There is only one place left to go. With slow, stiff movements, you cross the few feet of cold, packed earth to your bed. It is not a soft, inviting sanctuary. It is the same lumpy, straw-filled sack you crawled out of this morning, a lifetime ago. The dusty, faintly sweet smell of decaying straw rises to meet you. It is the smell of the beginning and the end of your day. You lift the coarse wool blanket. It feels heavy, slightly damp from the humid air, and smells of sleep and unwashed bodies. You slide in your calling for a moment as it touches the cooler parts of the mattress. Your husband is already there, a large, warm lump in the darkness. He is fast asleep, snoring with a low, rumbling cadence that is as familiar to you as the sound of your own heartbeat. This is your bed. But it is not your bed. The concept of a private, personal sleeping space is a luxury you cannot imagine. You sleep together for warmth, for practicality, for the simple reason that you only have one bed. You arrange your body to fit in the remaining space, careful not to wake him. Your hip settles into a familiar hollow in the straw. The mattress rustles and crunches with your every small movement. And you remember your companions, the fleas. The itch on your ankle that woke you this morning feels like a distant memory, but you know its relatives are still here, waiting in the warmth. You perform one final, sleepy ritual before surrendering to the night. You pull on your linen coif, the same one you wear during the day, or a similar one reserved for sleeping. This is your untyped. It's not for fashion. It's not for fashion. It keeps the lice in your hair from adventuring too far, and more importantly, it offers a thin, psychological barrier against whatever might choose to descend from the thatch above. The roof over your head is not a solid, sterile ceiling. It is a thick mat of reeds or straw, a dark, complex ecosystem teeming with life. Spiders, insects, mice, they all make their homes up there. The untight is a flimsy shield, a silent prayer that a spider won't lower itself onto your face, or that a shower of dust and unidentifiable debris won't fall into your hair as you sleep. You close your eyes. You are waiting for the oblivion of sleep. But will it be an unbroken 8-hour journey? It's unlikely. Historians, poring over old diaries, medical texts, and court records, have uncovered a fascinating and widely debated theory about your sleep. They call it segmented sleep. For much of human history, it seems people did not sleep in one long block. They had a first sleep which lasted for a few hours after dusk. This period of wakefulness wasn't seen as insomnia, It was a normal, useful part of the night. People would get up, tend to the fire, have a snack, or engage in quiet conversation. It was considered a perfect time for prayer and religious contemplation. A silent, peaceful window when the rest of the world was still. After this waking period, they would go back to bed for their second sleep, which lasted until morning. Perhaps this is why. It's hard to imagine a deep, unbroken slumber in a bed that crawls and ditches, in a room that is either too cold or filled with smoke, next to a snoring partner. Your sleep is likely a shallow, easily disturbed thing. You don't fight it. You expect to wake up in the deep, cold blackness of the night. It is simply the rhythm of your world. But for now, all you want is the first sleep. Your exhaustion is a physical weight, a heavy tie pulling you down into the lumpy geography of your mattress. It is stronger than any itch, stronger than the lingering ache in your muscles. It is a welcome drowning. You feel your thoughts begin to blur, the sounds of the room fading into a meaningless hum. Your body, at last, begins to surrender. The tide of exhaustion is pulling you under, but your mind does not go quietly into the dark. In the final, liminal moments between waking and sleeping, you perform one last, silent act. An act of faith. Lying still in the rustling straw, you murmur a prayer. It is not a long, elaborate prayer recited from a book. It is a short, memorized verse, likely learned at your mother's knee. A simple appeal to God, to the Virgin Mary, to a favorite local saint whose name feels comforting on your tongue. Perhaps it is the Paternoster, the Our Father, whispered in a garbled, half-remembered Latin, the meaning of the words less important than the familiar, rhythmic sound of them. You pray for protection from the things that lurk in the dark. Not just the tangible ones, like the rats in the larder or the spiders in the thatch, but the intangible ones. You pray for protection from the evil eye, from a neighbor's curse, from the demons and malevolent spirits that your faith has taught you are as real as the straw beneath you. In a world with no scientific explanation, the sudden illness or a crop failure, the supernatural is a powerful, ever-present force. Your nightly prayer is a small, essential shield against a world of unseen dangers. You pray for your children, that they will survive the night, that they will be spared from the fevers and coughs that carry away so many of their playmates. You pray for a good harvest, for the health of your livestock if you have any, for your husband's safety at his work. Your prayers are a litany of your anxieties, a direct and honest accounting of your hopes and fears, ushered up into the smoky darkness of your home. The role of religion in your daily life is a subject of immense historical study. It was not a once-a-week affair confined to a Sunday service. It was woven into the very fabric of your existence. The church bells marked the hours of your day. The calendar was structured around saints' days and religious festivals. Your entire worldview, your understanding of life, death, and your place in the cosmos was shaped by your faith. But scholars continue to debate the depth and nature of that faith. Was your nightly prayer a moment of profound spiritual connection? Or was it more like a form of superstitious insurance, a ritual performed out of habit and a healthy dose of fear, just in case? The truth for you is likely a complex, unexamined mixture of both. As the final words of your prayer fade from your lips, you can feel the city outside finally settling. The sounds of the day are long gone. Now there is only the occasional bark of a dog, the distant cry of the night watchman calling out the hour, and the soft, almost imperceptible hum of 1,000 sleeping souls packed tightly together within the town walls. The smells of the day, the market, the manure, the muck, have settled too, replaced by the cool, damp smell of the night air, which seeps in through the cracks in your walls and the gaps in your shuttered window. It's the smell of cold stone and wet earth. You are no longer an individual, a woman with a name and a list of chores. You are a small, warm body in a vast, cold darkness. Your entire world has been reduced to this single, sensory moment. The scratch of the wool blanket against your chin, the rustle of straw beside your ear, the faint warmth of your husband's sleeping form, the taste of stale Leyland wood smoke still in your mouth. And that is your day. A relentless 24-hour cycle of struggle against filth, hunger, and exhaustion. A day of tiny victories and grinding defeats. A day that will be repeated, with slight variations tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. It is a life lived on the very edge of survival, a life of profound, unrelenting, and almost unimaginable discomfort. And as you finally slip into the welcome oblivion of your first sleep, the last sensation you feel is a tiny, familiar prickle on your leg, an itch, a flea bidding you good night, and promising to be there to greet you in the morning. And so the sounds of that small, smoky room begin to fade. The rustle of the straw becomes the whisper of the wind in the trees. The distant bark of a dog becomes a soft echo in a long, quiet valley. You can feel the lumpy mattress dissolving beneath you, replaced by a feeling of floating, of gentle, weightless support. The story is over, and it can be left behind now, like a set of old, heavy clothes you no longer need to wear. You can allow the images to soften and blur, the flickering firelight blending into a warm golden haze. The dark, muddy streets transforming into a soft, winding path through a quiet meadow. The worries and the hardships of that life, the itch, the cold, the endless labor, you can let them all just drift away, like smoke rising into a vast, starry sky. They have no weight here. They cannot touch you. All that is left is the gentle rhythm of your own breath, rising and falling in the stillness. A soft, easy current carrying you further and further away from the shore of wakefulness, out into a calm, peaceful sea of slumber. There are no chores to be done here. There is nothing to fix, nothing to clean. There is only rest, deep, profound, and well-deserved rest. And if you are still listening, you can feel my voice getting quieter, softer, becoming just another part of the peaceful silence that is now surrounding you, wrapping you up like the softest blanket. The final page is turned. If your eyelids are still not heavy, another story might be the final lullaby you need. Sleep sweetly.